So, back in the yonder year of 2021, I decided to read through The Wheel of Time, a fantasy epic by Robert Jordan spanning 14 long novels. And it's been a while. It's to the point where I've got 100 new subscribers to the channel, at least since I last put out a video on this, and I've probably lost some who think I've given up. I have not given up. I am here to tell you that I am still reading The Wheel of Time. 10 months ago I started A Path of Daggers, and I'm still on A Path of Daggers. We're approximately halfway through that book, but I am feeling optimistic that I will steamroll through to the end of it. Now here's what happened, okay? First of all, pretty sure I've got ADHD. I've mentioned that several times on the channel before, but people who are here for this particular topic may not be aware of that. It's very informative when talking about this series. I loved books growing up as a kid, and I gradually lost my ability to stick to a page as I got older, as a lot of people do. I don't know if that's an ADHD thing or a growing older thing, but that's what's happened to me. And I found salvation in audiobooks because I can listen to them as I walk to work. The first audiobook I ever listened to was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, because apparently I hate short box books. And actually that's kind of what led me to Wheel of Time, was Audible. And I know Audible has its issues, but we started, so we'll finish kind of thing, right? And so I read The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance, and at the time I think those were the only two audiobooks or books in the series for the Stormlight Archives. And I heard about how Brandon Sanderson had finished this series, and that was fascinating to me, and it's still fascinating to me, the idea of this author taking up this much beloved, extremely long-running fantasy epic series and finishing it. So I'm really excited to kind of see how that happens, like if there's a notable change in writing style. Also, I would consider that a spoiler. I would like to discover that for myself, so please don't leave a comment letting me know if you think there is a change in writing style. I know that doesn't seem spoilery, but, you know, I'm kind of, like, getting towards this point to find out for myself. And then my plan is, when I do get to that point, I'm going to read all of Brandon Sanderson's stuff. But what I'm here to talk to you today is what happened here. Well, basically, it gets really dry around the middle, and I've heard other people who love The Wheel of Time talk about this. It gets really dry around the middle. You have swathes of chapters with not much happening, with D-tier characters, like 50 D-tier characters being introduced to, you're not going to hear much from again, and you have to hear about the way they feel and their relationships with other D-tier characters in great detail. You know, this is not a concise series, because of course it isn't. And that kind of got to me in Path of Daggers, and eventually I just found it so dry I stopped, and I went and I read a Doctor Who book instead. And I was doing this thing as well. After Lord of Chaos, I read a different novel. I read How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. I was going to alternate different novels every time, but I just didn't come back after I started reading Doctor Who novels. The second Doctor Who novel I wrote wasn't very good. Meant to say read, haven't written any Doctor Who novels yet, so I stopped reading that as well, and just lo and behold, I have not read a book in about half a year now, because that's how my brain works. I get too stubborn to admit defeat, and then I just stop reading. But hey, I've decided to continue Path of Daggers, and I'm having a great time with it. And what was the last thing I wanted to talk about in that regard? So one of the things about the Wheel of Time series is that I've found it kind of daunting in its length, to the point where I worry about memory and retention. And so I worry that if I take too long of a break from this series, I won't retain enough information to continue enjoying it, and I would have to start from scratch, which is never going to happen when the series is this long. But lately, I've been approaching it with more of a fuck it, just get it down attitude, and I was surprised when I returned to Path of Daggers just how much information you do retain. That being said, there are also many intricacies which are now going to be lost on me because of how long it's taking me to read this series. But I'm just learning to let that go, because if I can read through this series and hit the big events and understand the general concept of what's happening, that's where I get the enjoyment from. It's not the small stuff. And while small stuff does pay off in a big way, I do kind of tend to... Like, Robert Jordan's pretty good at giving you little reminders. I think Robert Jordan knew how much of an undertaking it was reading this series. So he gives you little reminders about things as things happen, which is very comforting, and I'm very grateful for it. So yeah, all this to say, if you subscribed to me years ago for Wheel of Time content, it's still coming, it's still happening. I would say I'm sorry it's taking this long, but ultimately I'm coming to terms with the fact that this is just going to be a series that takes me years to get through, and that's fine. I'm viewing it less of a arduous journey, which is fraught with peril when it comes to memory and retention, and I'm seeing it more as a fantasy pilgrimage of sorts. And if it takes me until my 30s to finish it, that's fine. I can just enjoy it at my own pace. And, you know, obviously I know it's about the journey and not the destination, but I'm someone who finds it hard to not focus on the destination sometimes. But I'm getting to the point where I'm enjoying the journey, and I'm telling myself it'll be sad when I don't have Wheel of Time to read in my life, because it will be. So I should enjoy it while I've got plenty of Wheel of Time left to read. So yeah, hopefully it won't be too long until we get to a blurble reasoning for Wheel of Daggers, Path of Daggers. But if it is, I figure you've at least got this video to let you know I'm still on the case. So anyway, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.